Hey, and welcome back to Real Housewives Recaps. Today I'm covering Vanderpump Rules Reunion Part 2. So let's get some news out of the way and then we'll get into it. So, as you've heard, holy cow. Stassi and Kristen, Max and Brett have all been fired. And I say good riddance. Wow. So, yep, they got fired. If you've been living under a rock and don't know, Max and Brett, of course, tweeted out some terrible things. And Stassi and Kristen, a whole bunch of things came to light that were racially insensitive and they needed to go. If you have a minute, I would highly recommend jumping on Andy's Twitter because people have been tweeting really funny things about getting rid of Jax and Brittany as well. So I'm very curious how that'll all play out. But holy cow, I was truthfully surprised because it didn't look like anything was going to happen to them. So I'm glad that they got rid of them. Truthfully, I wish they'd go ahead and let go of Lala too. I've just not been impressed with her, and this reunion, she just lays it on thick, and she's so full of it. And the way she talked to Raquel, I think she needs to move on as well. So part 2 picks up where we left off with Tom Sandoval and Jax arguing. Tom says, I've never had anyone do more effed up things to me in my whole life, friend or foe, than Jax MF Taylor. Jax says, you still wanted to come to my wedding. And to Jax, I say, ugh, again, it's about your wedding. We had to sit through a whole season of your wedding. Nobody wants to come to your wedding. Jax continues to be an ass and talks about not wanting him there. And Tom brings up, well, you were like, I expected you to fly there and surprise me. Just like you expected your mom to hit you up after all the shit you said about her. And Brittany yells, do not go there. And Lala says, we aren't mentioning the parents after last year. Don't go there. Why? Why not? If Jax said it, I'd say it's fair game. Then we see Andy telling everybody to hold on. Everybody's yelling. Vanderpump yells, wait just a second. And finally, Andy mutes them all, which was brilliant. Andy talks to Jax and says, even though you and Sandoval took a break from each other, you said you still envision growing old with him. How do you feel about him now? Jax says, if I hated the guy so much, I wouldn't have his name tattooed on my arm. And again, I call back to other seasons where Jax tattooed every girl he's ever gone on a date with on himself. I don't think tattoos mean that much to him. Tom says he sincerely wishes the best for Jax. He wants him to do great things. And then Andy moves on. He moves on to Dana versus Scheana. And why did Scheana treat her like that? And okay, let's talk about Scheana for a second. So it's come out, of course, about the editor that played favorites and purposely gave Scheana a bad edit. And here's what I say. Okay, it's going to be controversial, so hold on. What the editor did was horrible. And I wouldn't, even though I don't care for Scheana, I don't think that's right. Okay, I'll give her that. But Scheana is kind of a dick. She was kind of a dick to Dana. And to me, all I think about with Scheana is teenage girl. If she competes with somebody over a guy, she's going to ice them out. And that's kind of what she did to Dana. I actually thought Dana was pretty interesting and I liked her. She does a good job speaking up for herself. And Scheana, I've never been a big fan of. And so, anyway, that's my thought on that. What are your thoughts? What do you think about Scheana? Lala speaks up here and says, everything about Dana rubs Scheana the wrong way. Scheana says, I'm the girl who's always nice to the new girls. I'm not doing this again. I'm not getting screwed over every time. I just wasn't interested in making friends. And Dana says, well, Charlie's a new girl and you made friends with her. That's because Scheana's full of herself. So I think Charlie is a mini Scheana. So of course Scheana's going to be nice to her. Lala, I think Scheana is less intimidated by Charlie because she's less interesting than Dana. Charlie says she almost quit the show like 6 times because of the bullying. And Jax yells, you should leave. Andy asks Vanderpump what she thinks about all this. And Vanderpump says, I knew that there was competitive factor over Max. And she's right. I think that's exactly what it is. It's competitive over Max and Brett. To which I say, they're both so gross. Who wants either of them? So then Andy turns it over to Max and asks him about Palm Springs with Scheana. And he told Dana that they were just friends. Did the trip ever end up being strictly platonic? Max says, for the most part. And Andy says, for the most part, what does that mean? Max says, we were playing a game that involved us making out with each other. And Vanderpump says, what are you, 12? Max says, I woke up with Scheana in bed together and then she goes down on me. and I stop her. Bo says, that takes a lot of courage to stop her mid-BJ. Dana says, I point blank asked if they hooked up. And Max said, no, after filming, I found out Scheana and Max made a pact to never let that come out. Scheana had told 2 people, and they both told Dana. And Dana says she's grateful to know this, and that Max has continued to gaslight her, and I think she's spot on. I think that's exactly what he did, and I think Scheana was kind of a mean girl to Dana. Then Andy moves it along. He starts talking about James Kennedy. He talks about his ups and downs and his awful behavior. They show flashbacks having heart-to-hearts with Vanderpump, as well as apologizing to Katie for the terrible things he said to her. They talk about Katie's reaction. She says she's proud of him, proud to see him put in the work. But it turns out that James has been sober for 10 months. Everyone is clapping. James cries and says he's seen the light and how Raquel saved his life and he loves her so much. Kristen can't help but interject and shakes her head. And Scheana says he should apologize to Kristen. James argues with Scheana and Kristen. Kristen says that James had just come after her and they argue. Andy brings up the awful text messages that James sent. Raquel says that was the final straw, that she had turned a blind eye to the mistreatment of her and to others in the past. Vanderpump says when he decided to change his life around, I'm there for him. Then they move over to Lala, who has been sober, she says, for about 1.5 years. They talk about when she and her fiance Rand got into it with 50 Cent. James posted a meme about 50 needing money from Randall, and Lala and her public beef with him, and she was saying that she had the LAPD outside of her house because of the death threats. It got so bad. James and I were beyond doing petty shit to each other, and there was a knife in her heart. James admits that it was really dumb, and he can see that clearly now. I was dying to hear about the 50 Cent thing more. She explained it happened while they weren't filming, and because of legal stuff, she can't talk about it. I've just not been into Lala at all the last couple of seasons. I'd say the last 2 seasons. And this was the interesting part of her, and she couldn't even talk about it. Then Andy addresses Lala and talks about at Katie's wine night, how she told Raquel that she forgot her place, how she sounded like she thought she was so much better than her. And she did. She did sound like that. Lala says, when I get into that zone, the shit I say that comes out of my mouth, I don't even know. Ariana says, that makes sense because we didn't know what you were talking about. Stassi said she was confused about what was going on. Lala says she was mortified and that Raquel's the sweetest girl in the world. Raquel has the line of the night here where she says, I'm too young and pretty to be tolerating any BS from James, and I feel the same way about everyone else. And then Andy brought up something that I didn't know, which is Lala apparently had gone on an after show and talked about Scheana, saying it's not interesting to watch a 34-year-old woman in a crop top and a slutty pony doing the same thing over and over again. Scheana said she cried and it hurt her feelings. She's done so much growth, and her friends make it seem like there's nothing to me and no substance, and it's really hurtful. Lala cries and says she's disgusted by the things she said to the people she loves, and she felt terrible about it. And then Stassi whispers Lala may be bipolar. Scheana says it wasn't just one time. Lala says she was mean to people, especially the ones who were passive. And then they take a break, and when they get back, Andy says, we're back with the Real Housewives. And then he says, oh, F word, which was really funny. I like that moment a lot. Andy shows clips of what everybody was doing in quarantine. And then he asks Kristen about isolating, and she reveals that she has a boyfriend. His name's Alex. And Jax has to interject and say it was the day after Max. Andy switches it over to Jax and talks about how he made a big deal on camera about how he hates strip clubs. But then we get to see footage of him getting a lap dance and being super into it. Jax is trying to say, when I got there, my friends were excited. And Brittany says, I told you I didn't care, so I don't know why you lied. That's because all Jax can do is lie. And here's where Tom and Jax go in again. Andy talks about the wedding and how Jax didn't appreciate Sandoval's efforts as best man. Jax says it's all for show. I feel like he wasn't going to be included in the wedding, so that's why he was upset about not going. And Ariana brought up a good point and says they would have filmed him there, and that he went to father's funeral. He flew 15 hours apparently to get there, and Jax is just a shitty person. And he says, Jax, he forgave you for sleeping with his girlfriend, Jax, of course, has to deflect and say something terrible and says he was sleeping with other girls at the same time, so he should forgive him. Tom says he's calling BS for a reason. We were so happy and having a great time because I love seeing you happy. Jax says, I think you're a good actor. And everyone argues. And Jax is a jerk. And it's just funny. Again, I encourage you to go on Twitter and just look it up because everybody's calling for Jax to be let go. We get to see a really cool section here where they're talking about Sandoval and Schwartz. Apparently, they decided to make all these video messages and gave the proceeds to the employees of TomTom to help them out. And they raised over $50,000. And that's so cool. I thought that was very thoughtful of them. They didn't have to do that, and they did. They helped out their employees, and that's really cool. So then Andy turns it over to Brett versus Scheana. He talks to Brett, and I'm glad Brett's gone for so many reasons, but he just is trying to say, oh, Scheana came on too strong. She had the opportunity to be my friend, and it was too many wrong signals, blah, blah. He's just a jerk. He talks about Scheana being a bad kisser, and Scheana asking Brett if he even remembers it, and it was a whole thing. Andy brings up that Brett called Scheana middle-aged. Now, Scheana was 34 at the time, and Brett's 32. How does that work? And then it's brought up that Brett was pretending to have a future with Scheana, or Brett says that Scheana was wanting to pretend to have a future. But Danica says that she's seen the text and he flirted with her so much in the text. And Kristen says that he tried to make Scheana look like shit. So then we kind of get into what happened with Kristen, Stassi, and Katie, and the witches of WeHo falling apart. So Sandoval kind of steps in and explains that Kristen has always been an over-venter, that they all vent, but she does it too much, and that's kind of what Stassi and Kristen are saying here. Stassi is saying that Kristen made them look like bad friends when they weren't. Even Beau chimed in, who's been a longtime friend of Kristen, and says, when your friends hold up an ear to you, you vent to them, hearing you for hours over and over. But then it sounds like the next day she'd run back to Carter. And so that's kind of why they're frustrated. Kristen says hindsight is 20/20 and that she can see how they're frustrated. But no, I feel like it's kind of a storyline thing. I'm not real sure that Stassi and Katie sometimes can be a little bit mean girls. So maybe they're just ready to move on from her. Who knows? So Andy asked Kristen what she was most upset to be left out of, and she said it was Stassi's engagement party. It sounds like there is no current status between them all. They haven't spoken. And Andy finishes it out with Stassi saying, if your wedding was tomorrow, would you invite Kristen? And she said she's conflicted. And that's how that ends. So then we see a flash of next week. Scheana says, how am I paying you? And BJ's her money. We got a discussion of Beau's proposal. There was a rumor going around that Vanderpump was having an affair with Brett. Sounds like Jax and Andy kind of get into it, which I'm interested to see. Also, Jax versus Ariana. And Brittany says she can't stand Tom and Ariana. So it should be a really good episode. And of course, I can't wait to see that as well. So that is it for the episode. Let me know your thoughts below. I'm really curious to hear what you guys thought about this episode and how you think the episode or the reunion will wrap up and what they could possibly cover in the third episode. I just don't know that this reunion needed to be 3 parts, but what are your thoughts? But I really appreciate all of you guys watching. Thank you so much. Be sure to check out my other recaps. I cover Real Housewives of New York. I'm covering Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Of course, Below Deck Mediterranean. So let me know your thoughts. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Real Recaps. And I just appreciate you guys so much. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Thank you. Bye-bye.